If you're looking at the space as you currently are, obviously still
Yeah.
a big mover and shaker. You build MLG, you have a successful exit, you send it over to Activision, and then now you sort of have to you're sort of back in the wild, free to do whatever
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah.
You accomplish something, right? If you stopped there and retired, you would have done more than the 99% of all humans will do in a lifetime. Create something that people benefit from, create something that people are entertained by, you name it. So after that, you're back in the wild, and instead of taking a seat back, going to the beach in Miami, wearing the hat that you usually wear with that, those flower, the little umbrella drinks, which is weird to me because of the way you drink. You know what I mean? What sort of businesses do you see popping up? Like what are spaces that need filling in the space right
Yeah.
now?
Well, let me back up, because the context for what we're doing now has a lot to do with what we did at Activision. And back all the way back to the beginning, when I said we gravitated towards NASCAR as a business model, that wasn't because that's the one I wanted. That's because that's the one that was available.
Yeah.
Right. I always had this desire, and we started as early, I think, as 2008 or 9, working with the same law firm that represents the NBA on how can we design a structure that's more like an NBA franchise system. Because one of the things I've always really firmly believed, and it's pretty much been 100% true over time. So it's almost never true at the time I say it first. It becomes true later. One of the things I always say, I think you've heard me say this, is we are not recreating the business of sports. We're just, if all we do as an industry and as a community is convince the world that people playing video games against each other is entertaining and as important as people playing football or golf or soccer or basketball or whatever it is, that's a huge accomplishment. We don't have to recreate the rest of it, because somebody's already done that. It's been 100 years. They've perfected the model. That model is going to change, right? One of the interesting things about esports is the first big major sport that wasn't television natively. It happened after the internet, after YouTube, after those things. So there's definitely differences. But the reality is, like, we're not recreating advertising. We're not creating media rights. We're not recreating anything. And so that being the case, I would always gravitate towards the strongest structure and business model.
Mm-hmm.
The strongest structure and business model in sports is exactly the one that the NFL and the NBA use. Those are the two, think about this, two American created sports that are largely only played here, that have been exported around the world because of the power of the professional leagues behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Especially the NBA,
Yep.
Massively huge in China, huge all over the world. Those are sports invented here, commercialized here. The leagues are formed here. The leagues effectively own those sports globally because of how powerful that structure was.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that you can point me to. And I've had this, debate with everybody in our world many, many times over. There's nothing you can point to that's more powerful than that in traditional sports.
No.
And so I always wanted that model.
Yeah.
And we could never get there, even though I tried with Activision way before. When we had MLGTA, we had Call of Duty, we were doing a great job. I was like, give me like 20 years of rights to this game. And they couldn't do, you can't give anybody.
No.
It's the golden goose. You can't do that. So way before the acquisition, at one point I got a call from Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision Blizzard, who's kind of in my world, a legendary guy in the video game industry. I know most people like the creators of the games. I love the business guys.
Yeah.
Me Bobby's too. Bobby's an incredibly successful, intelligent business guy. He's really just one of the top people in the world, in my opinion. And so it was amazing to be able to talk to him and eventually work with him. But, what he said right away was, our whole company thinks of what you guys do as sort of fan engagement and marketing. I know it's a business. I know there's a big business behind this. If you can make it look anything like sports is a $600 billion a year business. And I said, no, I agree. I just need your game. I need to own the long-term rights to your game. And he's laughed a little bit. And so we met, we had a bunch of conversations. And that led to them saying, like, look, I think if we can bring this in to Activision Blizzard, we have the opportunity to do what you want to do. And that eventually led to, I actually went over to Activision first and created this new division with Bobby called Media Networks. But the idea was right away, how do we create an NBA-like structure here? And so that's the first thing I did was start designing that blueprint. Then we did the acquisition, brought all the whole MLG team in, and that, then sort of handed off the blueprint of that to the guys at Blizzard, Nate especially, who ran with it and created the Overwatch League. But that was the important thing, is once you brought together, and this is kind of business guy stuff, but there's a concept called a value chain in business, where if you think about like paper as a product, it starts with trees, and somebody moves the trees to a mill, the mill cuts the things up, processes it into pulp, the pulp gets shipped to the paper plant does this, the packaging guys, there's a whole chain. All of those are different companies.
I draw on it and then I sell it to somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're the artist, you create some stuff on it, and that's a value chain. If you think about esports, the hard part always in the early MLG ESL world was MLG and ESL didn't own any games, they didn't have any long-term rights to any games. It's really hard to create a solid business model or a league structure without having the two things together. So I said to Bobby, look, either we're going to buy Activision or you're going to have to buy us, because these things have to be the same thing in order for this to work.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And so that, what I'm really proud of there was, first of all, almost everybody who was kind of like my era of esports thought they always thought I was a little bit of the corporate suit in the room in this world, because I wasn't the gamer, right? I was the guy, I was literally wearing the suit. Right?
The white blazer.
Yes.
With the arm candy.
I wasn't the guy that spent, thousands of hours playing Counter-Strike. I wasn't a former pro like Astro or anything. I was just whatever. So, and the European guys, especially the ESL guys, didn't like the idea that we were going to create closed gardens like the NBA, systems like that. So Twitch didn't like it. Nobody really loved it, but I was like, this is what's going to make this successful. And this will actually help the whole industry grow, because now you have a stable platform at the pro level. It's not going anywhere. It's backed with lots of capital. There's a real business model behind it. It's going to grow. And so launching the Overwatch League is the first proof of concept of that. Was super powerful because we got it out the door, and all the initial owners also owned baseball teams or NFL teams or NBA teams, which was amazing to see.
Mm-hmm.
And also it allowed you guys, a big part of the concern from the kind of, OG world of esports, the purist guys was, okay, even inside Activision Blizzard, the people who had been part of esports inside the company for a long time were like, this is going to basically push out the Hectors and Hastros of the world and all the other team organizations who are not going to be able to afford to buy into this type of system. And I said, no, you're totally missing the point. This is going to give them the opportunity. You guys you weren't as much, but lots of the teams were trying to raise money for years before that, any kind of venture money or anything like that. And it was impossible, right? I'm sure you had some of those conversations. It wasn't a thing. Then you were like, okay, I can buy this asset. I own this thing. I own a piece of the IP rights to this league, this game. It's a real system. It's backed by a multi-billion-dollar company. They're not going to let it go anywhere. So that happened. And then as you were a part of this and a beneficiary of this, but a lot of money came flowing into the system. Obviously, everything doesn't happen perfectly, right? Things break along the way, and you get some wins and some losses all the time, but more wins than losses for guys like you and me. And so I think that's the important part. But what it really set up was that structure had so much permanence right out of the gate because of the amount of money and the type of people coming into the system. And then, once that was sort of going out the door, I was like, look, this is all I really wanted to do. I just wanted to have this thing happen and create it and see it go. I'm not the kind of guy that wants to stick around and run this thing inside of a big company. So I said to Bobby and the COO of the company at the time, I was like, maybe I should leave early, not roll this whole thing out. And they said, well, we want you to stay, but we get it. You're an entrepreneur, not a big company guy. But there is one big thing to do, which is how do we put the whole commercial organization together and monetize the thing? How do we sell sponsors? How do we think about media rights, all that kind of stuff? So I then started building out that team. We had a little bit of it there. We started accelerating that process, and we really approached the advertising and sponsorship market as, here's the NBA version of what I've been selling you for the past 17 years. And it's amazing. Yeah. And right out of the gate, it was wildly successful. And I think that's one of the things too, is, my version of what makes things in esports successful has a lot more to do with proving out the commercial viability of it than anything else, because I've seen over over 18, 19 years in this space, I've seen a lot of things, a lot of good ideas go away because they were never commercially viable. And I've seen a lot of things sort of skid along the bottom for years and years and years and sort of exist as like zombie things because they never get big because there's no money to reinvest. There's no structure behind it. There's no permanence. So having that permanence of the Overwatch League model, the franchise system that was city-based, and then seeing how commercially successful it was right out of the gate before the first game was even played. And everybody always criticizes Overwatch. It's got all these problems and not enough people play the game or watch the game or all this kind of stuff. It still makes more money than anything else. Still. And it's because of the structure. And if that was successful, then I thought, okay, we're going to do this multiple times inside Activision Blizzard. The other big publishers are going to want to do this because they're going to want to control their IP. And they're going to want to benefit. If Bobby Kotick's doing something, you can be pretty sure there's billions of dollars that are going to come into that over time. And most of the video game publishing industry believes that. So a lot of them started to look at that and follow it. And obviously Riot moved to franchising right after we announced the Overwatch League. And the rest of the industry would, I thought, start to do that over the next several years. So as I was getting ready to leave Activision, I said, look, I'm going to invest in the New York team because I'm a New Yorker. And if I could have, if I was a baseball fan 100 years ago, I would have invested in the Yankees. Now I just give them my money for my seat every year. But, look, I knew the Wilpon family. They were amazing. They sort of bought into the whole vision. I wanted to be a part of that. And so that was good. It was just sort of me putting my money where my mouth was. But what I realized was there are no more MLGs to buy. And this is going to get bigger quicker. And it's not as easy as going finding a TV sports production company and say, go broadcast my Call of Duty event.
Yeah.
It's very, very different. So there was going to be a lot of services and technology and what I just sort of loosely refer to as infrastructure that would be necessary for if all the publishers wanted to go big with esports and create leagues and really do the right thing. There's not enough resources out there for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And the resources that do exist are pretty small companies. And big companies, especially big public companies, when they're making big bets, they want to make big bets with partners that are also big and institutional and have capital backing and those kind of things. And so the next phase to me in esports matched up with what I wanted to do, which is, okay, great. We kind of took care of the top end. There's a model for that now. I don't need to be there. It's going to happen. We sort of proved the issue. Now, how do we create all the other stuff that helps those things be successful and then creates the structures and ladders and everything else for what happens below the top tier pro leagues? Because still, even though you can now get it, as you know, you got Huntsman earphones on right now. You guys pay people to play Call of Duty. They get a contract just like they were playing basketball in Chicago, right? Same idea. Maybe not as much money yet, but it will be. If that's happening, what's the journey from 7-8-year-old kid who's really good at the game to playing on the main stage at a big arena? And that still hasn't been worked out, right? It's still, if you're a really good 7 or 8-year-old basketball player, somebody can describe to you as a 7 or 8-year-old exactly what your journey will be to Madison Square Garden. Yeah. You can't do that in this space yet. And it's not going to be software that figures that out. There's going to be a whole lot of infrastructure and complexity and capital and stuff like that has to happen. And I thought that there were multiple opportunities like that. The other big one is just, it's still, most of the money being made on esports is not anywhere near representative of what the value of the audiences are. And almost all of that monetization happens human to human. And if you think back to MLG TV, that's how stuff scales, right? Yeah. $80 billion a year is spent on television ads. There's not anywhere near that in the esports space. Not yet. Not yet. But, and look, that 80 billion, a lot of it is wasted because TV is a sort of shotgun approach, right?
Billboards,
targeting,
radio,
it's not
newspaper.
Great. For 70 years, it was the best way to advertise anything and to make a dent and to launch brands or presidential campaigns, whatever it is. It's still a great way to do that. Yeah. It's a mass untargeted thing, but it's not the new world. And so I think there's also a whole other world of kind of marketplaces and data management and things like that will help the monetization thing.
Yep. So.